This week on Vaticano, during his Sunday Angelus and later during his visit to a Roman parish, Pope Francis asked Christians to read a passage of the Gospel each day. Also, we hear the story of the first successor of the founder of Opus Dei, who will be beatified this September, and we speak to the cardinal who oversaw the placement of John Paul II's tomb and tells us about the miracle that will make him a saint. Discover this week's Passion Relic, the Crown of Thorns, what it was really like, and take a look at an institute specialized in church fathers. All this, plus the Pope officially receives a group of deaf and blind people for the first time, and discover a museum with treasures of Blessed John Paul II, coming up next. On March the 16th, the Church celebrated the second Sunday of Lent, dedicated to the Transfiguration of Jesus. The pontiff, who did a spiritual retreat last week, stressed fundamental aspects so that the Church's mission bears fruit.
Salita e discesa.
Ascent and descent. We need to go aside, to climb the mountain in a space of silence, to find ourselves, and perceive better the voice of the Lord. This is what we do in prayer. But we cannot stay there. The encounter with God in prayer again pushes us to come down from the mountain and back down into the plain, where we meet many brothers and sisters weighed down by fatigue, illness, injustice, ignorance, material and spiritual poverty. We are called to take the fruits of our experiences, which we have had with God, to our brothers who are in difficulties, sharing the grace that has been received. And this is curious. When we hear the word of Jesus, we hear the word of Jesus and we hold it in our heart. The word grows. And you know how it grows? By giving it to the other. And this is the Christian life. It is a mission for the whole church, for all the baptized, for all of us, to listen to Jesus and to offer it to others. Do not forget, this week, listen to Jesus and think about the gospel. Will you do it? Will you do this? Then next Sunday, you will tell me if you have done this. Keep a small gospel in your pocket or in your bag to read a small passage during the day.
That same evening, the Pope visited the parish of St. Mary of the Prayer and Death on the outskirts of Rome. A group of youth and parishioners welcomed him there with enthusiasm. During his off-the-cuff homily, he encouraged them also to read each day the word of Jesus. The crypts of St. Peter's Basilica. Many popes are buried here, including John Paul I. But for 3 years now, there has been an empty place where Blessed John Paul II's tomb once was. At his beatification in 2011, the wooden coffin holding his mortal remains was moved up to the ground floor of the basilica, to a more accessible place for the thousands of pilgrims who first started coming the day of his funeral to pay their respects.
La cappella di San Sebastiano è stata scelta perché è la cappella che permette.
The chapel of St. Sebastian was chosen because it is a chapel that allows so many people to reach the tomb of John Paul II. From the moment of his death, on April 2nd, 2005, an endless flow of people began to come to his tomb. I remember the first moments, but I cannot name many, when his body was exposed in St. Peter's Basilica, and day and night a line of people would pass by just to give him a quick greeting. I remember on the first night, a man came up to me and told me, insistingly, "I want to come close to John Paul II." I responded, "There's a whole order. If the people go beyond the barriers, you risk having a horde of people come too close to his body." And he answered me, insistingly. I had lost my faith, I had strayed away, and I found it again, seeing the faith of that man, especially during these last days, the days of his illness.
Mi commossi al punto tale che chiese a un gendarme se poteva.
I was so moved that I asked a gendarme if he could get closer. He did, and I saw that he knelt next to the body of John Paul II and then started to cry. I only knew he was crying because his shoulders were shaking. He stood up and said to me, "Thank you." I do not know who he was, but I still remember his face. This is one of many incidents. On the third night, I remember a young man who showed me his arm and said, "Look," and you could see he took drugs. He told me, "I am 23 years old, but I am old inside." That man was young, and he burst into tears. I now have understood, and I will try to do so, everything to change my life. And one can tell of so many incidents. John Paul II, perhaps because he approached millions of people in his travels, has sparked people returning to him. So many people have felt the need to return to him as if to thank him for this approach that he had done with so many people throughout the world.
Per questo avvicinamento che lui aveva fatto con tanta gente sulle strade del mondo.
Francis will canonize Pope John Paul II as saint on April the 27th, alongside Pope John the 23rd. The only thing that will change about the tomb is the red writing Beatus will be modified to Sanctus. Alvaro del Portillo will be beatified on September 27, exactly 5 months after the canonization of Popes John Paul II and John the 23rd. The Spaniard was the first successor of the founder of Opus Dei, Saint José María Escrivá. Here at Rome's Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, people who knew him and people who didn't alike were gathered in mid-March to remember his legacy. One participant was with him during the meetings of the Second Vatican Council 50 years ago.
I
accompanied him during all of the work sessions because I was his collaborator for the conciliar commission that worked on the discipline of the clergy. The image of Father Alvaro del Portillo, who appears in the Second Vatican Council, helping as secretary to support the decree, was like a man chosen by God, a divine vocation, a man consecrated by the Lord, a specific sacrament instituted by the priestly ministry of the Church, and a man sent. Christ chose him, consecrated him, and sent him to evangelize. He is a model, especially now, when Pope Francis is shaking the world strongly into consciousness.
He came several times to Spain, and we had the opportunity to have some get-togethers with him. And in two of them, I could talk to him and ask him something. And for me, it was very impressive because even though we just our meetings were very brief, he transmitted a peace, certainly, when we were with him, and he showed that he loved you. I remember once asking him one question about my spiritual life, and I started saying, "Father, you don't know me," and he stopped me and he told me, "No, I know you because I love you." And that was for me very impressive, in the sense that he had in his heart all the people of Opus Dei, and not all of Opus Dei, but all the people that he cared for and he loved, and for that reason he really knew each one of us. Certainly his contribution to the reaffirming the spirit of Opus Dei, which is the sanctity and holiness in the everyday life, is an important point, in the sense that he's reinforcing a message that had been forgiven for many years or centuries in the Church, and with the coming of Opus Dei has been revitalized and remembered to any Christian, the sanctity in the ordinary life.
Portillo was born in Spain in 1915. He would become an engineer and later a priest of Opus Dei. For the young Portillo, the beginning of his life of holiness was in the footsteps of one declared saint and in the presence of another.
I would say that holiness appeared during the Second Vatican Council because it is very beautiful to think about this. John the 23rd will be canonized. Pope Paul VI is moving on the path of being a blessed. And besides these protagonists of the Council, were people like Father Alvaro, who is going to be beatified now. So this all reminds us of the holiness within the Second Vatican Council and its message of holiness for the future of the Church.
Any beatification is a gift for the Church, not only in that case for Opus Dei. I think the beatification is putting a model or giving a model for all Christians. Certainly for the people who live the spirit of Opus Dei and follows the teaching of Saint Josemaria and his most faithful successor, Monsignor Alvaro Portillo, is even a more happier day. But in any case, the beatification is a gift for the whole Church and a grace for all the Christians.
Stay with us. After the break, we visit with hearing and sight-impaired pilgrims prepared to meet with the Pope, and we visit a Roman institute specialized in the early Christian fathers. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano.
Este es el Instituto Patrístico Agustiniano.
This is the Patristic Institute, the Augustinianum, which was founded in 1970 by Augustinians, and it was also an initiative of Pope Paul VI. The initiative was launched especially so that Augustinians could offer this academic service to the Church and to further study the Church's traditions and Church Fathers, starting from St. Augustine, who is our teacher and spiritual founder. And from him onwards, all the traditions of the Eastern Fathers and Western Fathers are studied, as well as the Armenian and Syriac Fathers.
We started very meekly in a way. However, after a couple of years, the institute, which was the only institute of its kind in the world, became known. And we had a host of professors, really full-time and well-known people who vied with each other to come and teach here, even gratis. So, well, we presented then the institute at the Patristic Congresses at Oxford, and they became well known.
Students at the Patristicum who obtain a licentiate can teach in a seminary, and if they obtain a PhD, they can teach at a university. Many of the Institute's PhD graduates are now professors in Rome's pontifical universities.
It was created with that goal in mind, and since then, several generations of teachers and students have passed through this cloister, which is a small academic community, but very welcoming and thorough in its research. Here one studies a lot of Latin, a lot of Greek, and one tries to study the Church's traditions with the heart of the Church and with the tools that science gives us, archaeology, history, numismatics, and so forth. That is what we offer the Church.
De manera que eso es lo que le ofrecemos a la iglesia.
My specialty, let's call it so, goes the transition between biblical times, New Testament times, and the times of the Fathers. So, first, second, more or less, third century, but not later. But there are specialists then who specialize in one father or in a school, etc.
Sí, la biblioteca, digamos que sería una continuación ideal de la biblioteca.
The library is an ideal continuation of the Angelica Library, which was the main library for the Augustinians. And after Italy's unification, it went on to belong to the state of Italy. After the 1970s, with the founding of the Patristic Institute, called the Augustinianum, it became more specialized in the old Christian literature, in patristics, the study of the Church Fathers. So it is a very specialized library in that area, starting with the 8th century.
Aside from the library, the Convention Center makes up certainly another space for encounter and fruition, not only of the Patristic Institute structures, but also activities that the Institute carries forward. There are many occasions of encounters in which the library, the aula magna, and other halls are used. Every year, there is an international encounter of scholars of ancient Christianity, which involves over 1,000 people, and that is similar to an initiative that takes place in Oxford, which also annually welcomes so many scholars of patrology, ancient Christian literature, and ancient Christian history.
Di letteratura cristiana antica, di storia del cristianesimo antico.
All of this together forms the Patristicum, a modern-day center of study on the greats of the first centuries of Christianity.
On March the 29th, Pope Francis will meet with associations for the blind and the deaf. It will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for many people like Jacob Badet.
Stay with us. After the break, we feature this week's Passion relic, the Crown of Thorns, and a Discover Museum dedicated to Blessed John Paul II. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. Santo subito, the Italian slogan meaning make him quickly a saint. That was the desire after the death of the Polish Pope John Paul II, the predecessor of Benedict XVI, which will come true on Mercy Sunday. John Paul II's legacy includes numerous writings which he had already written before becoming Pope, but also his papal works. Many are collected right here.
This is the John Paul II Pontificate Center for Documentation and Research, and so there are two divisions, two sections. The one is for documentations, and so this is the archives. We have here the archives with the documents of Karl Wojtyła, written by him, and also from the pontificate of John Paul II, the archives. And then the library, it's about 30,000 books, and the half of them is on the pontificate, or about the Karl Wojtyła and John Paul II life and his teaching, his thought. The other thing is the museum, and we have here about 20,000 different objects. These are mostly the gifts given to the Pope during the pontificate. Part of them, this is not all these things, but we treasure here part of these gifts. And so we can say that also in these objects we can see the history of the pontificate of John Paul II. Another section of our center is the research division. And so we organize scholar conferences, meetings, and also we publish books in different languages.
But the foundation itself has set another goal.
Also zu diesem Ziele
It was John Paul II's wish that a foundation be created, that the management took over to secure the finances for the operation. But an additional task was to care for the concerns of young people from the former Soviet Union, not only Poland and not only former communist countries, because Poland belonged to this group back in the 1980s, but even others. At that time, the Pope thought about the Soviet Union. One could say that the Pope had had a prophetic gift, because the priority was to take care of people who for years had had no access to the Western world, and thus also to help them gain access to the Christian heritage. He felt there was some kind of hole. So the foundation was supposed to focus on this priority. It was especially supposed to offer scholarships to young people. So our duty includes gathering funds and offering young people from Kazakhstan, from Siberia, but also from Belarus and the Ukraine, places to study, first off in Poland, but also in Germany, France, England, and the United States. For example, to help them get access to Western libraries and archives when they graduate.
Zugang zu westlichen Archivalien, Bibliotheken bekommen.
Each week of Lent, Vaticano is showing you one of the relics of the Passion of Christ. Our expert, a professor of biblical theology at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, specialized in the New Testament. This week we found out what the crown of thorns was really like.
Thorns is not normally as we think when we see some imagery of our Lord, because probably the crown of thorns was like a helmet that puts on the head, not only as a crown, but as a helmet. And that was put with pressure on his head. So of the crown of thorns, we knew that in Jerusalem was venerated until the 6th, 7th century. Then, by the invasion of Persians, that relic went to Persia, but the Byzantine kings or emperors, they got the relic from the Persians and they conserved them until the King Baldwin of Jerusalem offered. He bought it from the Byzantines and he sold it to St. Louis, the King of France. And the king was so commoved and so moved by having the crown of thorns that he built maybe the nicest chapel there is in Paris. That is La Sainte-Chapelle. That is all made by you say stained glasses, all made by stained glasses. And in the center, there is a special place where you have the crown of thorns of our Lord. The thorns that we have here in Santa Croce in Jerusalem were a gift from the King Louis from France that he gave to Rome.